Hey there, welcome to Board Game Hot Takes, the podcast where we give our immediate reactions to the hottest board games just minutes after playing them. My name's Tim.
This is Adam.
And I'm Jen.
And we're going to give you our hot takes on the game we just finished playing, Dinosaur World. As always, I'm going to give a brief description of the game and then we'll jump in with our thoughts. In Dinosaur World, you're trying to build the most exciting and lucrative dinosaur theme park by building attractions, creating dinosaurs with collected DNA, and giving Jeep tours of your park. But watch out, if you don't invest in enough security, and even sometimes when you do, you might end up with some park visitors' deaths on your hands. The game is played over 6 rounds, and each round has several phases. You'll start by drafting your workforce from a worker database, followed by a public action phase where you'll take turns exchanging workers and money for DNA or 3 types of attractions. The next 2 phases happen simultaneously for all players. First, you'll spend workers and money on a set of private actions, which include creating dinosaurs, investing in security, and upgrading your Jeep. And then you'll send your visitors on a Jeep tour, activating a set number of attractions in your park, depending on the level of your Jeep. The riskiest attractions can create the most excitement, which turns into money at the end of the round. But even the most exciting attractions become boring for visitors if you activate them too many times. So you have to continue to build your park and add new and more dangerous attractions. At the end of 6 rounds, the player with the most deaths in their park will lose victory points, and the player with the most victory points is the winner. Dinosaur World was designed by Brian Lewis, David McGregor, and Marissa Masura, is being published by Panasaurus Games, and as of the date of this podcast release is still available to back on Kickstarter for a few more days. Let's jump into our thoughts. Now, there's a couple unique things about this podcast, so before I start asking some questions, I want to share a couple things. Number one, this game is still up on Kickstarter. It has not been officially published yet. And we played on Tabletop Simulator with a prototype copy of the rule book. So we kind of learned it out of the rule book. We played with probably some prototype components that were on Tabletop Simulator. And I'm sure some of these things will be changed by the time the actual production copy is in play. The second thing I want to mention is that you might notice during the introductions that the dulcet tone sounds of Chris's voice didn't join us today, but we do have a guest. Her name is Jen. And we'll give Jen a chance to give us a little bit of her gaming background. But I also wanted to point out that our experience on this game was her first experience with Tabletop Simulator. And so as if any of you have used Tabletop Simulator, you know, it takes a little time to get into the game and get used to it. So that may have had some impact on our feelings about the game as well. So I just want to be upfront about that. So Jen, why don't you introduce yourself really quickly and just tell us what kind of games you've been playing lately? What do you really like in your kind of hobby board games at this point?
Thanks, Tim. And thanks for having me today. A little bit of my gaming background probably comes directly from Tim and his wife, Danielle. We've been friends now for over 10 years, and we started vacationing together as families. And what do you do when you're hanging out with another family that likes board games? You play them together. And so we started playing. Tim really introduced me to strategy board games. And so he really tried to get me to love Castles of Burgundy probably over 2 or 3 trips. And eventually it stuck. And once that one stuck, there was absolutely no going back. And so I love that one, as we know. So we play that online right now, given the situation, and also in person now that Tim and his wife live out in the same city as I do. I like Everdale. I like the story of it. New favorite is Parks. I like Parks a lot because I think it's gorgeous. I think it is simplistic, but the mental acrobatics that you have to do in it are also really stimulating. And on a personal note, I like it because we got to involve my 9-year-old son in it, and he's been asking to play it. So as soon as I can involve my 9-year-old in any sort of game boarding, it gets really exciting. And so those are some of the highlights of my gaming recently.
All right. Awesome, Jen. Great. And we're hoping to occasionally have regular guests on, whether it's adding a fourth voice to our podcast, or, you know, when one of us can't make it, you know, bringing other people in there. So hopefully we'll have Jen back again in the future, but she was game enough to join us online and play Dinosaur World. And so we're happy to have her with us to talk about it tonight. So let's go ahead and jump into the actual discussion about the game. Let's start with you, Adam. Why don't you give us your take on some of the mechanisms of the game, things that stood out to you?
Sure. So the first thing you'll notice about Dinosaur World, it's essentially a worker placement. So you, like many other worker placements, you gather a bunch of meeples, maybe more meeples in this case than different worker placements games. I think you get about 9 at the beginning of the round. And you're putting them out there. So there's the first kind of phase of the round. You have this public area where you can get paddocks. You use a worker to get a paddock, or a dinosaur, a dinosaur paddock, or a special building, or like a regular building. And then after that first phase, you're kind of then heads down on your own board, still distributing those same workers out. So you kind of have to have that choice between the public and your own personal worker placement spots. So that's an interesting mechanism right off the bat. I wonder if you've seen anything like that, Tim.
Well, one thing that I thought was interesting is that although it feels like it's going to be a worker placement game, and part of it is with the private actions, the public actions are really what you're doing is you're trading workers and you're kind of treating them as resources. Traditional worker placement, there's spots on the board and you're putting your worker out there and maybe blocking it or, interacting with the other players. But in this game, you're really not, doing that. They're not placing workers. It's just, I'm going to pay, this many workers to get this many DNA, or pay this worker plus money to get this one park attraction. So I thought that was kind of interesting. They make the workers a resource and you have to decide whether you're dumping them early or whether you're saving them to use the worker placement spots in your private action. So that was kind of unique with this game.
So yeah, it is pretty interesting how you can kind of use your workers and save them for later. And that's kind of a choice you're making right off the bat. Interesting piece of the puzzle there. The second kind of most noticeable thing beyond the worker placement aspect for me, or workers as resources, was the park building itself and selecting these hexagons from your public land and filling in your kind of hex grid of how you want your park layout to be, which is important because the next part of the game has a Jeep tour going through, and you have to kind of, as you're doing all this, think about the route for your Jeep to go through, and can you still afford workers for that Jeep to visit that specific area and kind of get the most efficiency out of your park.
Yeah. And I'd like to talk about the Jeep tour a little bit more too. But before I jump into that, Jen, anything for you that really stood out as far as mechanisms?
For me, the mechanism, the biggest piece is what I think I'm going to label the multiplayer solitaire game part of it. So the fact that there was a very limited amount of time that we spent interacting with each other. And I remember like the specific moment, I think there was only one time I was blocked by one of the two of you. And there was a little bit of interaction there. But other than that, even when we were drawing our tiles, if that's what you would call it, it didn't feel like there was a lot of interaction. It was just waiting for that person to do it and then doing it. We didn't necessarily affect each other all too much. And maybe that's because we were so new to the game. And the strategy, especially in the first round, was just kind of like, throw it all on the wall and hope something sticks, right? And so looking at that, but I really do like player interaction. Gaming for me, for the most part, is social, whether it is, kind of being fun and cheeky in the game or the conversation that can occur when another person is playing. So whatever that connection is, I really appreciate about board gaming. It's been like that for me since I was a kid. And so this one did lack that social aspect. But I will never forget the person that took the dino paddock the one time in the game that I needed.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised, to be honest. I was reading the rule book and I was kind of learning it with you guys, but I read the rule book a little bit beforehand. And when reading that, the game is split up into many phases, as I mentioned in the introduction. And there's really two phases you interact at the beginning, right? You're drafting those, the workers from the database, kind of picking the cards. And then you're doing those public actions. And really the way you're interacting there is it's not like you're blocking people, but you can get to either the DNA dice and grab them first, or you can get, specific dino paddocks or specific attractions first. It isn't too punishing. Like, it's not too interactive though, because unless you have your eye on one specific one and it's really important for your strategy, they just refill up again. So it's not like your choices really get more limited. As soon as you take with the DNA die, they do get more limited. But with the paddocks and with the attractions, at least the way that I read the rules, if I understand right, I think it refills as soon as you pull one off. So there really isn't even too much interaction there.
I will say with the first aspect of the round is the meeple drafting. So if you dig a little deeper off the surface, if you're looking at other players' boards and seeing exactly what meeples they might need, there is the opportunity to do a little hate drafting, quote unquote.
Yeah, that's a good point, Adam. You're absolutely right. The first few rounds of the game, I don't think any of us were really kind of catching on to, how important those were. But I started to notice about the middle of the game and towards the end that was actually kind of a really fun decision because one, the way that the game chooses first player is based on who's behind in victory points from the previous round. So there's a little bit of a catch-up mechanism. But going first in that worker drafting actually matters more than it seemed like it did originally because you're all getting 10 workers. but the colors of the workers can have an impact. And we'll get into that in a second. But I noticed that too, like by the middle of the game, I was like, okay, I have a very specific thing I want to do this game. Like I want to upgrade my Jeep several times. Oh, but you guys just drafted all the purple cards before, the cards with the purple workers before I could. And whether you were doing it for your own strategy or whether you were doing it because you saw that I needed more security, so I needed yellow workers or a better Jeep, whatever, you definitely could hate draft a little bit there.
Yeah. And to round out the interaction piece, there was just a little bit with the specialty buildings, because some of those were kind of neat and might benefit a certain strategy more than others. So a little bit of a grab for those, the DNA dice, like you said, and then the objective card. So like many other Euros, there's a race to meet these objectives during the game. So that was the one other kind of component of player interaction. Other than that, it's pretty sparse.
Yeah, and actually it's even I think unique in that it's not only that you're just kind of doing your own thing on your own board and doing it in turn order, but this game is unique in that after you take those first couple kind of phases of the round, then all of a sudden it just basically tells you to go off to your own board and do your thing. And that's like the major parts of the game. There's the worker placement, the private action. So you got to figure all the stuff you're going to do there. And it's kind of nice that you don't have to sit there and watch somebody else decide what they're going to do. You can kind of do it on your own thing. But what surprised me was that they also want you to do the Jeep tour on your own, just as your own thing. And to me, the Jeep tour is where all the story in the game is. Like the Jeep tour is the most interesting part. Like, hey, I just sent my visitors on this tour and they visited this dinosaur paddock. Oh, and one of them got eaten. And then I had to go over to the, DNA lab and, create some, but I didn't have a scientist this time. So I just basically lost excitement. I got my tour just got more boring and I didn't even get a benefit out of it. Right. So there's like a fun little story that came from that Jeep tour. And yet the way I read the rules, at least, it looked like we were just supposed to do those on our own and then move on to the scoring at the end of the round. And that was really strange to me.
It's sad, right? You're like, yeah, man, I'm gonna bring my guys over by T-Rex and then go to a restaurant and get all this money, and they're gonna be so excited. They're gonna be talking about T-Rex the whole time. So that aspect is cool too. You have to plan your route. So there's a little bit of like route building, and as the game goes on, those routes get degraded in terms of value they give back to you. So you have to plan how you're going to hit the points in your park, and then there's that mid-game shift too of your Jeep starting. Well, it's going to be at a new location somewhere, so you have to sort of, as you're building out your park from one side, plan it for how it's going to come back the other way when you start your new Jeep location.
Yeah. I think the Jeep location I think we should spend a little time on that, because that is, I think, one of the most interesting things they did here, right? Like, so it's a tile laying game, and you do that by spending resources and worker placement. But this one, the location of the tiles matters. But it's not like a lot of tile laying games that the location matters based on what other tiles they're next to, or, like at the time that you place them. This one's pretty neat because you can kind of plan into the future in the game. You can start out and say like, hey, my Jeep can only go 2 spaces or 3 spaces. So I'm going to plan a short route. I'm going to focus on building up this one route and then use it. And then there's some really cool motivations to prevent you from reusing the same route over and over again, to motivate you to go to other parts of the park. And then after the end of the third round, like you said, you basically you move your park opening from where your route always starts and move it to a different place in the park. So you can kind of plan that up, and set yourself up to have a completely new and interesting and exciting route, coming in from a different location. So that's it's pretty neat. And also the fact that you can actually like upgrade your Jeep. So at first your route is kind of short, doesn't do a whole lot. But then later in the game, you can kind of set yourself up to take longer routes if you've invested in your Jeep. Mm-hmm. What did you guys think about there was a mechanism, which I didn't really go into in the rules explanation, so I'll talk about it here. But it was the fact that the first, when you visit one of the locations in your park with your Jeep tour, it generates excitement. And excitement at the end of the round ends up turning into dollars. So basically, the more exciting that your tour is, the more money you're getting in your park. And that makes some thematic sense. But it's kind of neat that after you use a park location and get the excitement for it, then you put a boredom token on there. And every time you use it, the boredom picks up, and basically the boredom detracts from your excitement. And it can get to the point where not only are you not generating any excitement, but sometimes you have an excitement deficit. And I thought that was really neat. It's kind of cool. Like, you have to keep generating new attractions in your park. Otherwise, people are not going to be interested in going there. What did you guys think of that? Did have you seen anything like that I thought it was just really clever. What about you guys?
For me, the multiple layers was awesome, but it was also like forehead slapping for me, right? Because we started the game again, throw everything on the wall, and then we got to that point and building out the route, and then I'm realizing that I'm not just building out the route. I'm not just doing these. There's 3 or 4 things to think about during every single move you're making on this infamous Jeep tour, which again is a 1993 Jeep Wrangler, no doubt. But it required a lot of mental effort to keep all of that straight, especially for the first time through. And so when I started to get it, I realized that my Jeep tour was complete in a way that I was never going to get more than like 1 or 2 steps. And I had just buried myself. But it was still, as I was learning it, I was still enjoying the process of how it felt to learn it. And therefore I wanted to continue doing it. It wasn't like one of those failure moments and I'm done. I appreciated how the failure made me think and feel. And even though I was probably not going to dig myself out that game, I could already kind of be strategic about how I could have prevented getting buried in the next time.
Yeah. All right. Right on. I love that. What about you, Adam?
Yeah, that's one thing I love to think about as I'm playing a board game or learning a board game, how to unravel the puzzle that the board game is presenting. And does this particular puzzle feel good for my brain to kind of solve and work its way through? So that's cool to hear how your brain worked that through, Jen. Okay, what was the original question? I totally forgot the original. What were we talking about?
I was curious if you thought that the mechanism about the fact that you gain excitement and then you basically lose, like it becomes boredom after.
Yeah, so kind of your route degrades is what I think I mentioned earlier as you're moving, as you visit spots. I think that's pretty neat. That is very interesting. So you kind of want to come back to some spots a couple more times, but there's a certain way and a certain order to do it to maximize. So again, that's just another piece of the puzzle, and I'm not familiar with any kind of route degradation, or maybe that's like a worker placement where as you go back to a spot more often, it becomes less valuable. But it's different. It's unique. It is very thematic how you're driving your Jeep through, and then your guests are like, oh, here's the thing, and now now the trash cans are all scummy because it's been here for 6 months and it's kind of gross. And some little kid spilled his ice cream over here last week and they haven't cleaned it up yet.
Gum stuck on the window.
All the gum everywhere. Look at this place. It's getting dumpy. So yeah, it makes sense. As a attraction's been there longer, nobody wants to see it as much. It's cool.
But that's the piece for me that was missing because we did it all separately, right? Like that's the kind of fun that I can see coming from this game. And maybe it's just a rule you modify. Maybe we're not, I don't know how you guys feel about that, but maybe there's our family rules where we play it just a little bit different because Adam saying that, I want to hear that. That's fun. Exactly. It's enjoyable.
Yeah.
Right. And I had those moments. I mean, and I love the theme. And so with my 1993 Jeep Wrangler. So I wanted to have those conversations. And so I can imagine modifying it in a way that would make that a little more, feel good.
Yeah, I got to say, I mean, I'm not a big fan of house rules most of the time. Like usually I want to play the game as the designer intended it. I assume that they've play tested it and that they've gotten feedback. And so, their play testers would have told them whether there was a problem. Maybe it's because this isn't through development yet, right? They might still be doing play testing. Mm-hmm. They may still be working this out. My greatest hope for this game would be that there is a rule in there that motivates the players to observe and be invested in the opponent's Jeep tours, right? Maybe it's a round goal where basically you're trying to see who can do the most of a specific thing on a given round. And so you wait and you watch that Jeep tour happen. And I didn't think the Jeep tours really slowed down the game too much, right? I mean, the private actions, maybe they take a little while to kind of figure out what you want to do and puzzle it out and plan out your turn. But the Jeep tour was pretty quick. You do your Jeep tour and it take, 30, 45 seconds to kind of walk through each of the steps and trigger the actions as they needed to. So I totally agree with you on that, Jen. And I think that if they don't end up changing the rule in the final game, I think that I absolutely would always play this game and say, okay, we're going to do Jeep tours in turn, even if it doesn't impact each other, just because why else are you playing the game if you're not going to get to see how that, kind of resolves every turn?
You guys are that's a great point. Like when we were playing on TTS, you get to the Jeep tour and you're just heads down. You don't care about what anybody else is. You don't even know what dinosaurs Jen had, what dinosaurs Tim has, or if people are going on the roller coaster or, I had the D and A TM. Like, you guys wouldn't have even like cared about that if I hadn't like made such a big point of it, how like silly that's and how cool of a little, play on words that is.
We did, though. When you did point it out, we laughed with you.
At first we were trying to say it. We were like, Donatum? What is a Donatum?
It took us longer than it should have to get that.
It took us a while, and then we get, DNATM. The stories and the humor are there in this game. Just the interaction is not there as written. You're just heads down, blah, 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 moving my Jeep around. And that's a fun part of games that is maybe a little bit lacking in this version we played.
Yeah. I guess, Adam, one thing I'm curious about, because you played Dinosaur Island before, and I know that this is not Dinosaur Island, but it's clearly got the same DNA, so to say. Did the mechanisms were they similar to you, or were they different enough to really feel like a different game?
They got rid of one of the parts that I least enjoyed from Dinosaur Island, and they kind of replaced it with the Jeep Tour mechanism. So Dinosaur Island, it's very similar. It's just overall, it has a very similar feel. From the artwork to the wide sprawling boards and the color the bright, vibrant color, it has a very similar feel to Dinosaur. Maybe this is like slightly more refined and a little bit more streamlined.
Kind of like Jurassic World versus Jurassic Park.
Don't diss on Jurassic Park original. That was by far.
No. It was great. All I'm saying is that it seems like Jurassic World took the same formula and tried to enhance it a little bit. Maybe for the better, maybe for the worse. I don't know.
Oh, wait. Are people comparing this game to Jurassic Park? I didn't know that was. I didn't know people were doing that.
I don't know. It feels. I don't know. There may be some similarities.
Maybe. The game feels very similar to Dinosaur Island in its kind of multiplayer solitaire effect and its wide sprawling nature, but it is a little more streamlined with that Jeep aspect, and you're not sitting there forever trying to count the number of tiny little guest meeples you're pulling out of a bag. And that's the part that was frustrating about Dinosaur Island is you're drawn, 10 guests. Oh, there's a couple of thug guests that snuck in there, and they're going to, this eliminates that whole part of it, which was tedious to me. And it puts a slightly less tedious Jeep trail and slightly less tedious drawing all kinds of other meeples from different piles to put them on your boards at different places.
Okay. All right. Interesting. All right. Well, let's jump over to the production of the game. So Jen, why don't you go ahead and start it? Anything that was interesting to you about the production?
Well, you're going to have to define production for me then.
Well, okay. So production would be things like, the art in the game, the way that the board was laid out, things like that.
The little dinosaurs, the little tokens, the little pieces.
How did the look and the feel and the usability of the game feel to you?
All right. I'm still getting used to the word, so thanks for playing with me. My first was that the board game itself, play space was massive. And so I thought to myself as I was sitting here, like, gonna need a new kitchen table, right? If we're gonna bring this one into the house, that's still up to be, I haven't determined that yet, but there's definitely, I have a farmhouse kitchen table. So I thought to myself, more than 2 players, and this would definitely be an overwhelming experience. I like the color scheme. There's enough differentiation between the colors. We've talked a lot about that, the 3 of us, about, what a game looks like and how sometimes colors can be too close. I didn't feel like that happened on this one. The pastelness, it was like relaxing. I felt good about it. When the tactileness was missing, obviously, because we were on Tabletop Simulator, and I like that. I was thinking as we were playing, like, what are those dinosaurs going to look like? Is this dice, like, what pieces are they going to upgrade and what are going to be kind of standard? How sturdy are those cards going to be when you place them? A really weird piece that I liked, and maybe the 2 of you can help me identify what we put those little Jeep bonus tokens in those little slots. Yeah. I got a kick out of that when and I can imagine doing that and having it just fit perfectly. And so I like that piece, and I like that whatever the other piece. I like those Jeep bonus tokens as well, just like for gameplay. And so,
just wait until I introduce you to a game with a dual layer player map. you're going to lose your mind.
But it made me think, like my curiosity regarding how it felt made me think about the fact that when we play Castles of Burgundy in person, Tim, with you and Danielle, you upgraded that silver ore. And I saw I didn't know it was an upgrade. And then I saw it online because I was going to buy it for myself. And I was like, why is there just cardboard pieces, right? And I can't imagine going backwards now and playing just a regular Castles of Burgundy. I would have to go then get myself these silver pieces to make it happen, because that's now 100% a piece of that game for myself and the player experience.
Yeah, the worst part is that Castle of Burgundy is kind of known for having just about the worst production that you could possibly have in a game, and that's what I introduced you to. So it's all going to be uphill from here. I've seen the Kickstarter, the graphics and stuff like that, and I think the components are going to be super high quality in this. Like, it looks like they're going to all have different shaped meeples for the dinosaurs, and even it looks like they're coming up now. I think some of the stretch goals have been different shaped meeples for the different types of workers and different shaped jeeps, and I think the production is going to be super high quality. I know that one of the Kickstarter exclusive things is metal coins, instead of cardboard coins, which is always something I really love, with any game. So yeah, I think unfortunately we didn't get the opportunity to actually get the things in our hands at this point. And that's kind of the nature of gaming virtually. Unfortunately, we do miss out on that experience, but
yeah, this is kind of a Pandasaurus MO with having lots of meeples and lots of colors and some Kickstarter upgrades, but they're cool. The little silk screened meeples for not only the dinos, but the Jeeps. They'll have the one's like a little dune buggy. One's like I don't know if like a Humvee or a big Jeep. Yeah. So I'm on the Kickstarter page here. Lots and lots. So, the production is there.
Is there a 93 Jeep Wrangler in there though?
It looks like a white, I'm going to call that a Jeep Wrangler. Yep. I'm going to go ahead and call that a Jeep Wrangler.
Okay. There you go, John. You got your Jeep Wrangler.
All right. I mean, it just took it up a whole bunch for me.
So you got meeples upon meeples. You got chits upon chits, and you have just lots of stuff, and the art is beautiful. Okay, one of my complaints I'm going to shift to is there's so much stuff that you are tracking. I feel like there's a lot smarter ways to do the tracking. You're moving up DNA cubes up and down. So you have this giant board, and I got to think some engineer somewhere in some board game, I'm certain many board games out there's more efficient, better ways, more compact ways of keeping track of how many each color DNA you have, and what your security level is at, and what your threat level is at. It is cool putting those Jeep bonus tokens in the circle. That is cool. No question about that. But it just seems like there's got to be a more efficient way than sliding these cubes up and down and turning this DNA into other DNA and that DNA into... So that's one thing that bugs me about Dinosaur Island and this one, Dinosaur World. I don't know. Tim, you got thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, so that didn't really bother me at all. I mean, I think I came from a Euro world where you used to track everything with individual cubes, or chits or whatever. And so I'm glad that they're using tracks more frequently now, instead of all just different, like, oh, okay, I just got 2 red DNA. I have to grab 2 red, DNA cubes out of the stockpile. And then when I use them, I got to put them back. So I think using the tracks are actually a really nice way. So personally, that didn't bother me at all. The one thing I didn't like tracking the way that they had it set up was the excitement levels in the park. And I think mainly because I mentioned this last week when we talked about Vindication. Was it Vindication? I can't remember, but we talked about a game. Yeah, it was Vindication, but where you have to track something on a main board, out away from yourself that nobody else, where it doesn't matter to anybody else. Right. So as far as I could tell, and again, I might've missed a rule here. Maybe there are some parks or things that care about it, but I couldn't see any reason why everybody else needs to know where your excitement level is, right? Like having that tracked out on the main board meant that, and when I was doing it, I'm doing it in my solitaire thing. So basically what's happening is everyone's taking their Jeep tours, moving the excitement tracker up. And that means we're all like reaching at the same board in the middle of the table, trying to work around each other for no reason that I could see. There's no point to track those all at the same time. I mean, I guess the same thing could be said about victory points, and you do that so that you can kind of keep an eye on how the game's going. But the excitement points, that's already pre-planned. By the time you're moving excitement points around, you can't really get in the way of anybody else or impact anyone else. So I think that probably should have just been on the local player boards. instead of at the main center board. So that was my biggest complaint about Trek.
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking about that victory point argument too. Like, is it even worth having the victory points out there in public? But yeah, you can, it's nice to see what other people's score is and what the turn order is going to be next round if you want to try to manipulate that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. Why not have the victory points just right there on your own board?
Yeah. Yeah. All right, cool. So I'll just kind of re-highlight a couple of things that Adam just mentioned about the art, and that is that I absolutely love the box art. Kwanche Moriai's cover art is completely beautiful. The tile art, I don't know if Kwanche Moriai did those. I know there's another designer, another illustrator involved with the game, so it doesn't really feel like his style, but I really love the park attraction tiles. I think they're really cool illustrated. I just love the look and feel of the whole game as you're putting your park together. So to me, the graphic design in the game is a huge win. The art in the game is a huge win. I think it's beautiful. And I'm sure all the, physical components when we could actually get our hands on will be fantastic to play with too. So from that aspect, the production's great. Jen, you mentioned this big sprawling, table presence. And I like that. I like that in a game too, when it has a purpose. I'm not sure it needed to be quite so big here. It's kind of interesting that they have like the 3 separate island boards in the middle of the board to track the 3 separate types of tiles you can collect. So I don't know, like that just seems like something where they probably could have done that in one board instead of 3 separate boards in the middle. It's minor things there, but otherwise it didn't bother me.
Tim, I want to clone your statements about the graphic design in the game. The iconography is slick. Like once you understand the iconography, it is just easy to understand and smooth flowing. So that is a very nicely done.
Yeah, totally. 100% agree on that. I always talk about that as being like the user interface. And I think this game has a great user interface and very language independent, aside from some of the great jokes and the titles and the, things like really anyone could sit down and play this once you teach them what the icons mean. So that's cool. Okay, sounds good. So let's jump into our next question. What was your most exciting moment in the game? Adam, why don't we start with you?
I think I saw one of the objectives, and this is on levels of excitement in grandiose board games. This is if that's a scale of 1, this is like a 3. So it's something that stood out. But is there much exciting going? No, there's no like T-Rex breaking out and trying to eat Chris Pratt's head. There's none of that happening. Anyway, it would have been cool if maybe there was we saw more of the death die roll and a Jeep tour just totally demolished, but none of that happened. For me, the most exciting thing was not exciting, and I managed to get my park to meet all of one of the objective cards, and I got 7 points out of it. Hooray! What about?
Well, you did just barely beat me to it, so I was watching that closely. That was kind of an exciting.
It was super thrilling. What about Jen? What about you? Any moments of sheer excitement during the game?
It was when the T-Rex card actually came out onto the board. I mean, for me, it was totally thematic. It was a great opportunity for dialogue. We were all excited about that card, whether we were taking it or we weren't taking it. And so it just brought like the energy and the excitement for all of us, I feel, up. And so just by seeing that card, that was the moment.
I wanted to ask you about this, Jen, because I know you're kind of a big fan of the Jurassic World movie. And obviously this is, trying to kind of bring that theme home. How did it feel to you? You were kind of excited to play it because of your love of those movies. How did how did it kind of fit with what your expectation was in playing a dinosaur park themed game?
Well, I think that's, why you two got me to play this game, was because it did have like that fun theme to it. It's something when people ask me what my top 10 movies are of all time, I actually do say Jurassic World, which might make some, purists shake his head. But for me, it's because it's a phenomenal movie and it showed so much respect to the original movie and the Easter eggs involved. So it's almost like it made the first one even better. And then, so much. Anyway, I could talk about that all day long. But I enjoyed that piece. And I think I was having my own narrative and we were sharing those little side narratives. And it made it a little more fun than the game might have been with just being, dinosaur general. But I mean, there's definitely enough dots to connect in there. So
yeah, while you were talking about how Jurassic World was one of your top 10 movies and Jurassic Park isn't on the list, Adam's eyes almost popped out of his head. I think.
Just sheer disappointment exuding from every pore in my body right now.
So going back to what Adam said about his exciting moment, how he was wishing maybe we had had that experience where, a lot of people died on a tour or something like that. You're right. That didn't happen. And we really didn't see death come into this game very much. Now, we probably all played a little too safely. We were all like keeping our security way up ahead of our carnivorous dinosaurs. And the rolls, I did have a couple bad rolls, but it was like, okay, I had one death token, right? And so our death tokens just didn't gather. We didn't generate that. One of the objectives that we had was like generate 7 death tokens in one turn, and our max was like 2 or 3. Like it was not really. We were too safe, I think. we're not going to make any money running these respectable dinosaur parks. But anyway, yeah, I wish I'd seen some of that as well. I had some fun times, just like running the Jeep tour, and when my plan kind of came together and it all worked out, and my meeples, I had planned them all out right. Like there's some fun moments there. But yeah, I agree. I think the biggest thing missing here, which we've mentioned multiple times, is that there isn't that excitement that you can share with other people, and that kind of detracts from the experience a little bit.
One thing I want to say is, I think the question might come up is, hey, if I have Dinosaur Island, should I get Dinosaur World too? Is it worth it? For me, I wasn't the biggest fan of Dinosaur Island, and this felt like it filled, whether I was a fan of it or not, it felt like it filled the same niche, however you say that. So yeah, I don't know if I had Dinosaur Island and I was content with it, I probably, unless I was a super big, just fan of all this stuff, I probably wouldn't do it. But again, that's just small sample size.
I don't want to, actually, why don't we go ahead and move into the next question? And I want to follow up on what you just said there. So my next question is, would you request to play this game again? And Adam, regardless of how you answer that, I'm also curious to know whether you think at least Dinosaur World is a better game or a better experience than Dinosaur Island was for you.
Yeah. So when I saw that this game had come out, I looked at it was so similar to Dinosaur Island. Somehow life found a way and created Dinosaur World. And, I do think it's a better game. It's a little more streamlined. And would I play it again? I think I would. I'd get another crack at it. It's cool enough. And then maybe with the storytelling aspect, or like watching each other's Jeep tours and people getting slaughtered here and there, that could be funny. A lot more interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I'll jump in. Would I request to play it again? I think I will. I mean, so one of the reasons why we played this is I really wanted to play it before the Kickstarter ended, because when I saw it come up, everything about it looked fun to me. Like the mechanisms and the art and the production, everything just looked like a fun experience to me. And so I went ahead and backed it on Kickstarter, and we played it. And just after finishing our play, I just removed my backing from Kickstarter. So, that might tell you a little bit about how my experience was with it, but that's not to say I didn't have a fun experience. The main reason why I am not backing it is because I don't see this being a game that I'm going to get a lot of group play with, because it's so solitary, like that whole part of the game where you're just doing your own thing. I just don't see recommending this to, bring it out to the table and say, hey guys, let's all sit around the table and do something by ourselves. If I'm going to play a game with a group of people, I do want some of that interaction. As much as I like a good multiplayer solitaire game where it's like, I can focus on my strategy, you can't mess with me, but I still at least have to be involved and engaged in what everyone else is doing around the table. Otherwise, there's no point to playing a group game in my experience. And this doesn't feel like it's going to give me that, that motivation to sit and play with other people. That being said, I did actually enjoy some of it. I liked the puzzle. Like Jen said, I wanted to go back and try again and try to do better at it the next time. And so that makes me want to play it. I just don't know how much play it's going to get because of those reasons. So it's a game that I would definitely love to play again. I might even request to do it maybe when a final production is done and everything, and try it again. And if I got a chance to play a real version, and I found that it kind of address some of those issues we have at this stage, I might actually be interested in picking up, because there's still a lot. I was very on the edge. Like I didn't hate the game at all. I still almost backed it, but I just backed out because that's how I felt about it. Some people might not bother you at all. A lot of people obviously love Dinosaur Island as a game. It's been very popular. And the reason that I never went to Dinosaur Island was because I kind of felt the same thing, was that it felt like you were going to be doing a lot of stuff and not interacting with other people. And so I think Dinosaur World, although they probably address some of the problems with it, I think some of the same things still exist there. What about you, Jen? Would you request to play this game again?
I think if it was requested to play online, my answer would probably be no. However, I am curious enough about the tactile experience that if someone had it and that situation came up, I would probably say yes. I would probably hope that it was with a group of people who, if we didn't have house rules, that would still interact a little bit more. And that could come from being an in-person experience with this too. And so that's kind of how I look at it. And, when I'm done with the game, and even the first, like I think about the first time I ever played Everdale, I did not do well. But as soon as I was done, I was, playing with it in my head and the desire to sit back down. Oh, the desire, let's talk about parks, right? The first time I ever played that one, I made Tim and Danielle play it for the rest of the weekend. I think we played it a dozen times. And so because the minute we were finished, I wanted to experience that feeling again. And so, the feeling on this one isn't quite 100% there. And so I think I would challenge myself to play it again, as for the company and to kind of to do that challenge. But it did remind me of a quote that apparently I wrote on Facebook 9 years ago today. And so this is kind of how I approach that in-between gaming experience. It's that it says, ever tried, ever failed, no matter, try again, fail better, right? And so that's, I think, kind of sums this up. Like if I'm going to do it, I'm going to try it again. I don't anticipate being the world's best player at this game, but I will do what I do in a better fashion and hopefully have a more enjoyable experience.
Awesome. And Jen, thanks for classing up our podcast by bringing in literary quotes. You're setting the bar a little high, but
I do want to piggyback on one thing Jen said about the tactile experience. Might just be enough, but more than enough to play this game at the table. The colors and the vibrancy of the pieces, the coins are like little metal gears. They look pretty cool. I don't know if they're supposed to be gears or like Jeep tires. Could go either way, but they look fantastic. And the whole game and the aesthetic is enough. And that, you get that actual table interaction. It's a whole new level. So worth playing at the table, I think.
I think it will be worth a try for sure. One thing I didn't mention in the production, which is pretty neat, is that the tiles that you're placing in your park are huge. Like I feel like that's just going to create a really cool presence, in front of you when you're building out that park. So that was cool.
Now, Tim, I know you're wondering if the designers thought about, obviously they could make this game if they thought about whether or not they should. The answer is yes. They clearly did think about that because the Kickstarter is at $650,000 right now, and there's 4 days to go. So it's doing pretty well, and so people are enjoying it for whatever reason or another.
All right. Well, I hope that they also enjoy the gameplay experience, and if you listen to what we said, hopefully that gives you a little idea whether it's going to be a good fit for you or not. So, all right. Well, thanks, guys. I think that'll wrap up our conversation on. I keep wanting to say Jurassic World, but it's Dinosaur World.
Why would you want to say that? I don't know.
I don't know. I may have written that in the script, the show notes about 15 times as well. Before we actually end our show for today, and we'll get Jen's input into this as well, I always like to ask if there's anything you guys are excited about in gaming this week. So, Jen, why don't you kick us off? Anything that's got you excited to game this week?
Well, Tim, this week actually has a date on the calendar that's pretty exciting. It's Tuesday, October 13th, and it's your birthday. And so Tim's one request for his birthday is that him and Danielle and I are going to play games on Saturday. And so it's going to be like an all-day fun experience. And so cocktails, games, and just having fun. Oh, and I've heard Mexican food is involved. And so that is going to be the hottest event in gaming this week, I have no doubt.
Yes, you took the words right out of my mouth. I'm also very excited about that. And I'm aside from just being excited to get to play games all day, but Danielle and Jen are both great sports. They game with me as frequently as I can get them to.
As much as they can handle.
They game with me more than I deserve. That's what I should say. But they tend to like to play the same games, repeatedly, like the games that they're familiar with. Neither of them really like to learn new games too much, and that's understandable. But because it's going to be my birthday, I am requesting that they're going to have to learn, and I'm going to teach them a new game. And we'll see what it is. I have a couple things in mind that I'm excited to get in front of them and see if they're hits. But yeah, great. Thank you, Jen, for being a part of that, and I'm super excited for it as well. Adam, I'll jump in with one. I've got one other thing I want to talk about, but anything for you this week?
I'm just looking forward to the media coverage of Tim's birthday and the board games that ensue and whatever whatever comes out of there, hilarity or not, that happens from Tim's birthday.
Awesome. Well, damn the coronavirus, or you'd be right there with us, Adam. We'll miss you. One other thing I just wanted to mention really quickly is that I just found out that I was gifted for my birthday. I haven't actually opened it yet, but I was just given Maracaibo, which is an Alexander Pfister game, which I have been super excited about since it first came out about a year and a half or 2 years ago, and I cannot wait to get that. Maybe less than that, a year ago. Anyway, super excited to get Maracaibo out on the table. I just finally finished my first full playthrough of A Feast for Odin this weekend, and that took me, because we were moving and everything, that took me about a month and a half to actually get through reading the rules and punching all those cardboard out and everything. So Maracaibo is similar weight. So now that I just figured out how to play A Feast for Odin, we can set that guy aside and jump into another heavy Euro game. So excited for that. All right.
Nice. That game's supposed to be pretty epic, man. So excited.
Yeah. And we'll have to try it together sometime. I know you played Great Western Trail once before, which has some shared, roots to that. And you said you weren't a big fan of it. I've never played it, but yeah, we'll be interested to see how that goes and, whether I even like it at all. I've heard so many great things, but I'm excited to at least try it out and see how it goes. All right. Well, thanks everyone. I think that we can wrap that up now. You can find us on Twitter at BG_hot takes, on Facebook at Board Game Hot Takes, and on BoardGameGeek.com under Guild 3804. Tell us what you thought of our takes on the games we played today. We'd love to hear from you, and let us know if Jen should come back, because maybe we can talk her back into it again. Until our next podcast, take care, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks for having me.